Matthew 12. We'll get about halfway through this. We're all good? We're rolling? We'll get about halfway through. We'll get through 32, and then we'll pick up the rest of it next week, and then we'll take a break. Is that right? What's today? The 5th, 6th? 6th, so 13th, and then we'll take off the 20th. We'll take off the 27th. Maybe even take off one more week. I don't know. We'll make a call on that. So let everybody get back to school and get back in the groove, and then we'll come back maybe the 10th or so of January. So I want to delay a little bit so we can do we'll hit the parables, chapter 13. That's another long teaching session of Jesus. So that's kind of what we want to slow down on. So we'll try and go faster this, okay? So 12, Sabbath. We're going to talk a little bit about Sabbath, or about half the time about Sabbath, and then we'll get into the others. So in 12, it says at that time, or in that season, kairos. Remember the difference? We have kairos, which is a season, chronos, which is like literally chronograph, your watch, all right? Chronos is literally, it's 3 o'clock time. Season is, it's fall, okay? So at that time, or in that season, Jesus passed through the grain fields. Now, some of your translations may say cornfields. You can go back and forth. It's not a big deal one way or the other. Some people even think that this was barley fields. Okay, so there's some question on there. It's sort of a generic term for fields. So pass through the grain fields on the Sabbath. Okay, so very quickly, just to make sure we're all on the same page, what is the Sabbath? Saturday? All right, it is the 7th day. Obviously, it was instituted by God, saying, on the first 6 days I worked, and on the 7th day he did what? What word is used? Rest, okay? So for me, if you want to have the discussion, the argument, whatever you want to do about creation versus evolution, all right? For me, when God says, okay, for 6 days I worked, and on the 7th day I rested, so on the 6 days I want you to work, and then on the 7th day, 24-hour period, you rest as well. For me, that tips the scale way over on the 6-day creation side, because he doesn't say, I want you to take 1 millennium off, all right? So work for the 6,000 years, and then take 1,000 years off, all right? So that's kind of the way I kind of look at that. So if you ask me, how long did it take God to create the world? I'm going to go with a 6-day creation, because that Sabbath idea comes in. Now, can I prove it? Nope. Can you prove it? Nope. Can anybody prove it one way or the other? Nope. All right? So I just prefer to go with the one that makes God look really cool and lets him do it in 6 days, and then he takes that Sabbath day off, because that's what he instituted, okay? And so that's why I roll with that. I have no scientific knowledge whatsoever beyond that, okay? Now, it is the number 4 command, right? All right? So that's also on there. And then when you get to the cross, we have Jesus doing his thing, and he dies. He finishes. Remember, it is what? Finished. My work is finished. On which day? On the 6th day. And then what does Jesus do on the Sabbath? The 7th day. Saturday. He does what? Rest. Why? Because his work was finished. And then we pick up on the Lord's Day, the first day of the week, with the celebration of Easter and all that stuff, okay? So this is kind of a theme that kind of runs through the text on several different areas in several different ways. When they get this command, did they think of the Sabbath as a beneficial thing or a new obligation thing? Was this something that they went, yes, or did they go, oh man, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this? Which was it? Now, think about this. They get this 2 months coming out of Egypt. And what have they been doing, I believe, theoretically, for the last 100-ish years in captivity in Egypt? What have they been doing every single day? Making bricks, building pyramids, whatever you want to call it. I mean, making bricks out of what? Straw when Pharaoh would provide it, okay? So they're making bricks, making bricks, making bricks. And God says, hey, I got a new plan. Since I worked for 6 days and then I rested on the seventh day, why don't we, so you identify with me, why don't we institute that same rhythm? You work for 6 days and then take a day off. How many of them went, oh man, I have to take a day off and not do anything? No, that makes no sense, right? So for them, God gave them this Sabbath so that they could do what? Rest. Now, is that an obligation, thou shalt rest? Or is that a, hey, relax, take a day off. Don't work so much. Just hang out with your family. Hang out with your family. You think they took it a little too far? Yeah, they did. They did. And I've always thought it's ironic that these people are working really hard to make sure no one works on the Sabbath, okay? I mean, it's like the hall monitor. They're sneaking around. They got like twigs everywhere. They're finding people that are doing stuff on the Sabbath. And I'm like, no, this was a blessing. This was a benefit to them. I actually went and I printed out, there's 39 different categories of things you're not allowed to do on the Sabbath. You're not supposed to carry, you can carry stuff inside your house, but you can't carry it outside your house. You can't throw a toothpick in a fire because that's burning stuff, burning wood on the Sabbath. Striking a match, driving a car, using electricity. You can't turn on a light because turning on a light initiates a electrical reaction which causes something to burn, the filament to burn. So therefore, you're starting a fire by turning on a light switch, so you're not allowed to do that. You can't use a telephone because that uses electricity. You can't turn the gas down because you're extinguishing a fire, okay? You can't turn off lights either. So you can't turn on the light because you're starting a fire. You can't turn off the light because you are putting out a fire, and therefore doing work, right? No repairing, no adjusting. You can't tear anything to make adjustments, so therefore you can't tear toilet paper on the Sabbath because that is doing work. So good religious Jews will pre-tear their rolls of toilet paper the day before. Wind a clock, set a watch, tune an instrument, blowing up a balloon, in case you were wondering, you're not allowed to do. This is like their rules, all right? Tearing through the writing on a package. You can open a package, but if you tear through something written on there, you are technically erasing it by tearing through it. So can't do that. You're not allowed to cook, so therefore no boiling water. You can't wash, so even wringing out a wet garment, can't do that. Seal an envelope, attach postage to something, or using a safety pin, because that would be regarded as sewing. You cannot tie a permanent knot, but you can tie like your shoes, okay? So if you tie a permanent knot, you're actually doing work, but if you're tying your shoes, it's temporary, so it's not really work. You cannot rake your lawn. That's pretty easy. No watering plants. You cannot pluck a flower or pluck fruit, so you can't eat grapes because you're plucking it off of the little stem. No climbing a tree. Mowing your lawn, obviously that's easy. Squeezing a fruit for its juice, okay, can't do that. Milking a cow, that's off, okay. You can't pick the bones out of fish because that's working, all right. No sifting flour, straining liquids, grinding coffee, grating cheese, okay. So no grating your cheese. No making dough. You can't use lipstick or eyeshadow, okay. Because that is dying. Because that is dying. Dying, D-Y-E-I-N-G, okay? So you're dyeing your face, whatever. You cannot drive a nail, pitch a tent of any kind. which would include opening an umbrella because that would be de facto a tent covering you. So you cannot open an umbrella. You can't catch an insect, okay, because that's technically trapping. Um, no haircut, shave, can't cut your fingernails, no eyebrow plucking, all right? Swatting flies would be considered killing, so killing something, theoretically, I guess, to eat it, all right? You can't shine shoes, polish silver, all that stuff, okay? So that's kind of the rules. There were certain distances. You could walk 0.7 miles on the Sabbath, but then you had to stop, and you couldn't walk any further. So you don't walk more than 0.7 miles from your house because then you can't walk back. You just got to sit there, okay, and not do anything, okay? Now, think about this. You're 2 months out of Egypt. God goes, hey, work 6 days, take a day off. And it turned into that. It turned into the hall monitors walking around watching everything you're doing, all right? You know, yeah, different Jewish sects are going to interpret these rules in different ways. I would hope that we would look at them and go, cool, day off. God told me not to work, not to be employed, not to do what I did the other 6 days. Because built into that is what? For 6 days, what are you supposed to do? Work. That's the expectation. And then on the seventh day, don't work. Don't go to your job. Don't. Why? Anybody else found this, that if you work 7 days a week, what happens to you after a while? Amy, can you imagine teaching 7 days a week? You guys, you want to teach? I mean, y'all are pushing it to hit 5, right? All right. So it is. It's exhausting. Yeah, it makes him really tired too, and he's not very good at it later on. Yeah, Benny? Oh, yeah. Well, not their rules, but when the rule is, hey, you worked 6 days, take a day off. Can you go fishing? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's exactly right, because if you're doing that 6 days, you should be able to take the day off. And again, I would argue this. If you will find that rhythm to yourself of, you know what, I'm going to work for 6 days, and then I'm going to take a day off, and I'm not going to work, and I'm not going to do all this. I mean, this is, hello, Chick-fil-A. It's worked pretty well for them, okay? And I know for myself, Friday is normally what I call my sort of Sabbath. So I'll study, I'll do work, I'll do everything I have to do. And then Friday, I don't even look at my Bible on Fridays. I don't, because I need a day to step away from everything, to let my mind clear out, and then I come back at it first thing Saturday morning. That's my rhythm. It's been my rhythm for 25 years, all right? But that's important to me, because I know my mind can't handle 7 days of study, and prepare and to teach and all this stuff. So Friday's my day off. And that's something I've held throughout my entire career. So, yeah, Josh. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Physiologically and psychologically, you are diminished at that point, and you need that time to refresh, which is so cool because God designed us. He knows physiologically and psychologically what we can handle. And he goes, hey, take a day off. But again, what does the church do with this? Or what does the early church, the Jewish rabbis, what do they do with it? They turn this benefit into what? This obligation. Don't pick up that. Don't touch this. Don't. And so can you imagine growing up with these rules? Every Sabbath, you're like, okay, don't do anything. What do they say on the Sabbath? What, they don't even have push the button on the elevators? All right, you just keep riding until somebody else pushes the button for you, okay? So it's just, imagine turning it into this. Okay, so let's jump in. 12. That time or in this season, Jesus passed through the grain fields on the Sabbath. And I always tell people, whenever you see the words on the Sabbath in the gospel, get ready, because Jesus is about to poke, all right? It's never, and Jesus dutifully obeyed what the rabbis told him to do. He's always going to poke them, all right? His disciples were hungry and began to pick and eat some heads of grain. Now, I've never walked through a grain field. I've never picked a grain and eaten it. I don't know what that even means, okay? But they were doing what? They picked food, and some of the translations say they rubbed it in their hands and ate the grain. So they were harvesting, they were threshing, and they were preparing a meal, which you cannot do that according to their rules on the Sabbath, all right? But they were just doing this. So when the Pharisees saw this, observed it, they saw this, they said to Jesus, look, or behold, your disciples, your learners, the people who are following you, are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath. Okay? Now, what does the law say? Do no work on the Sabbath. Now, who had the interpretation that they're not allowed to pick a head of grain and nibble on it? Is that in the law? No. So that should tell you, what do the Pharisees think of the law versus the interpretations of the law? They equate them as having equal weight. The actual fourth command and then the interpretation, they're not doing what the law says. Jesus goes, well, here's what the law says. Your interpretation, and they're going, that is the law. The interpretations, they are the law. Okay, so understand that. All right, now, he said to them, haven't you read what David did when, in this moment in time, when in this one moment, he and those who were with him were hungry? Does that sound familiar? Who else was hungry? The disciples. The disciples were hungry. Jesus says, okay, haven't you read, which is really a massive insult to the Pharisees. You got to understand that, okay? So it's the carpenter from Nazareth is asking the Pharisees if they've read the scripture. Just own that one for a second, okay? People who have memorized the Old Testament are being asked, haven't you read this? Have you not read this? You should know this, all right? David and his guys were hungry, how he entered the house of God, and they ate the sacred bread, which is not lawful for him or for those with him to eat, but only for the priests. So is Jesus acknowledging that David did something that was not lawful? Yes. Straight up, here was the law. Here's the bread of the presence. Who gets to eat it? The priests do. But David did. Why? Why did David get to eat the bread? Why? Come on. It's a real simple answer. Hungry, all right? It's just that simple. Now, let's clarify this just a little bit, okay? When David comes into Nob and he is running away from Saul, when it says he was hungry, it's not, it's 4 o'clock and I haven't eaten since noon and I'm starving, okay? I always joke with Ashley. Ashley will not eat for like 48 hours, and then within 4 seconds, she's gone from, I'm fine, to, I'm starving, we have to stop the car right now and eat. And it's like, what? Did I fall asleep or something? So, it's from not eating to starving in 0 to 60, all right? So David was literally starving, okay? So he pulls in to eat. Now, I don't know how hungry the disciples were, but Jesus is right there. I don't think Jesus was excusing their, they got a little rumble in their tummy, and so he says, oh, go for it. Just break the Sabbath law, do this. You're fine. Do whatever you want. I think they were legitimately hungry, okay? And that's my interpretation. There is a principle called pikuach nefesh, all right? Pikuach nefesh says and it literally translates to save the soul, all right? To save the soul is the principle in Hebrew law that says if you need to break the law to save a soul, go ahead, okay? You can break the law if it's to save a soul. And theoretically, that's what he's saying about his disciples, that they were that hungry so that he's going to make this exception, just as David, the exception was made there. Okay? Verse 5, or haven't you read, again, shot, in the law that on Sabbath days the priests in the temple violate the Sabbath and are innocent? What does he mean by that? The priests in the temple are doing what on the Sabbath? They are working. They are doing what they did the other 6 days. Everybody agree? And he says there's an exception. And not only does he say, you know what, I'll just let them get away with it, but what's the judgment he makes about them? That they are what? Innocent. They don't have any guilt on them at all. All right? They are faultless. When Pilate is just talking about Jesus, he says what 3 times about Jesus? I find no fault. Same word right here. All right? They are faultless. Quickly, yeah. Mm-hmm. Was a week old? Nope. Nope. Only for the priests. It's only available to the priests. That's very specific in the law. All right? No one else was allowed to consume it. But pekuach nefesh, to save the soul, gives that exception to it. All right? 6, but I tell you that something greater than the temple is here. Okay? Now, what's he saying there? Okay, so the question on the table is, should the disciples have eaten the heads of grain, all right, because they were hungry? He goes, okay, David was hungry. He ate, all good. The priests do work on the Sabbath in the temple, all good. So the priests working in the temple can violate. If you're hungry, you can violate it. And he goes, something here is greater. Me, I'm greater than the temple. My disciples are serving me like the priests serve in the temple. And since I'm greater than the temple, they have even more right to violate the Sabbath and be innocent. So not only are they hungry, David exception, but they are also working in something greater than the temple, the Jesus exception. Everybody follow that? Is that okay? Okay. 7, if you had known what this means, all right, and he describes it. This is from Hosea 6. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. All right, that's the principle. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. You would not have condemned the innocent, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. I'm the boss of the Sabbath. I say what Sabbath is. Sabbath doesn't tell me what I have to do and can't do. I tell the Sabbath what it can do and can't do. I'm the kurios. Sabbath is my slave. I am not its slave. All right? So Jesus is making it very clear. Now, that's a pretty bold statement, right? For a Jewish carpenter. Yeah. All right? So that's fine. Now, let's look at this phrase real quick. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Okay? Now, in the original Hebrew, this is, again, Hosea 6:6, if you want to write that down somewhere. What is written there is, I desire hesed. All right? The love of God, this love of God that I could never possibly imagine deserving, but I receive it. God tells Hosea to tell the people, my desire is for you to know hesed, not you to know sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. So when David goes into the temple there, or in the, whatever it was, there, the priest's place at Nob, probably the tabernacle, God said, you know what, I'm going to make an exception because I want you to know how merciful I am to David, who is starving to death. And I don't want you to know, David, I don't want you to know you sacrifice even to the point of death. I want you to know how merciful and loving I am, more than I want you to sacrifice to the point of death. Because in Hosea 6:6, it says, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And then the next line is, I desire for you to have a knowledge of God and his mercy, his love, his hesed love for you, rather than burnt offerings. He says, I'm not in this for you to serve me, serve me, serve me. At the end of the day, I want you to know how merciful I am. And when you do this with the Sabbath rules, what does God want us to know when he establishes the Sabbath? You've been busting it for 7 days for 100 years. I'm the one who brings in the new rule. I am the Lord of the Sabbath. Here's the new rule. Just work 6. Go have a picnic. Because I want you to know how much I love you. I don't need you to prove to me how much you will sacrifice for me. That's not the point of the Sabbath. The point of the Sabbath is for me to express my love for you to have a knowledge of how much I love you, not for me to have a knowledge of how much you will be forced to sacrifice for me. And yet, what do the early church fathers do with this? What do the religious leaders do with it? How many early Jewish, first century Jews are going, you know what, every Sabbath, I just feel the hesed love of God. This overwhelming, gracious love of God. Don't pick that up. Don't turn that on. Don't do this. Don't carry that. 0.7 miles, you better stop. No, it became this huge obligation. And that's why he says, I want you to know how much I love you. I don't need to know how much you will sacrifice for me. I know that without you proving it to me. David, I don't need you to die right here in Nob just to prove how much you will follow the law. Get you some bread because I want you to know how gracious I am. All right? And how many other laws do we do that with? Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, instead of seeing the goodness and having a knowledge of the goodness of God in that provision of a law, not that demand of obligatory service. 9, moving on from there, moving on along. Like a little Muppets thing, isn't it? Anyway, I'm listening. All right, he entered, I love this. Whose synagogue? Why didn't Jesus say, my synagogue? Because they're all my churches. Why does Matthew refer to the synagogue as their synagogue, not our synagogue? Yeah, there's a distinction, there's a separation there. There's a Jewish gathering here, and that's not mine, that's yours. All right? There he saw a man with a paralyzed hand. It's a withered hand, all right? Zeros. And in order to accuse him, they asked him a question, all right? So what would you call this? In order to accuse him, they asked him a question. Trap, okay? Because they think they got both sides of this, right? We can play this all day. They asked him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? Is it lawful to heal, therapeuo, to heal someone on the Sabbath? Now, if you heal someone on the Sabbath, what are you doing? Are you working? Theoretically, if a doctor who works 6 days a week treats patients on the 7th day a week, is that person violating Sabbath? Okay? So he said to them, what man among you, if he had a sheep that fell into the pit on the Sabbath, wouldn't take hold of it, grab it, krateo, it's a strong, powerful word, and igairo, to lift it up, to raise it up out of the pit? Because theoretically, what's going to happen to the sheep on that day when he falls into the pit? Is the sheep going to go, oh, I'll crawl out? It will theoretically die, okay? A man is worth far more than a sheep. Okay, so what principle is he calling? What's he calling out? Pekuach? Yeah, pekuach nefesh, to save a soul. Okay? So he says, if this was a sheep in a pit, you would pull him out on the Sabbath. Now this man right here in front of me has a withered hand. Now, is he saving his life? Is he saving his soul? Theoretically, the man is in the synagogue. He's not a child. He's been living with this for quite some time. So would this principle only apply to the absolute heartbeat, taking breath, check your pulse, life and death? Or would it refer to quality of life as well? Later on, Jesus is going to heal the daughter of Abraham who is stooped over. And he's going to heal her. After a while, the Pharisees actually tell the people, stop coming to Jesus on the Sabbath. You can come the next day. You can come get healed the next day. Quit violating the Sabbath. And Jesus kind of, I think, just looks at him like, oh, Lord. All right. Literally, oh, Lord. All right. So, sorry, that was a pun. All right. And look at the principle he sets up right here. So in 12, a man is worth far more than a sheep. So if I pull the sheep out, I'm going to pull the dude up. All right. Why? So it is lawful to do what word? Good on the Sabbath. What word is this good? Kalos. Kalos. Excellent, beautiful, amazing. That was so cool what you just did. Because imagine you're an adult man and you have a withered hand and you walk out of the synagogue with a restored hand. Good day, bad day. Good day? Yeah. If he did this on Tuesday, what would everybody be saying? You're the best doctor ever. All right? So he goes, you know what? You go do good on the Sabbath. You know why? Because this obsession with don't is not the point. I came to demonstrate my hesed, not you suffer one more day to follow the rules so you prove your love to me. No, God was trying to prove his love to us by doing these healings, especially on the Sabbath. All right? There we go. 13. Then he told the man, stretch out your hand, extend your hand. So he stretched it out, and it was restored, as good as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted against him. Literally, it's how they took up a plan. All right? It's that word bulimai. It's not the will of God is the right now what I want versus what is my overarching plan will. This is the word, the overarching plan. They started to make a plan. They received a plan of him, how they might, what word do you have? Destroy? You have kill? Wow, okay. It's the Greek word apolumai, which is John 3:16, to perish. In John 10:10, the thief comes to steal, kill. The word kill there is actually the word sacrifice. So if you put that into the vernacular of the context, the sheep, you steal the sheep, you sacrifice the sheep by killing it, and you utterly destroy, to steal, kill, and destroy. That's this word, apolumai, to perish. It means to utterly destroy. Now, I would argue, I'll say it this way. I will suggest to you, I don't believe they were trying to kill Jesus at this point. So when they use the word here, apolumai, to destroy, I don't think the Pharisees at this moment in time were set, we have to kill this guy. I think they wanted to destroy him. Okay, do you understand the difference? Are you following what I'm saying? What I'm suggesting to you? That, kill, that's pretty extreme, okay? But we can destroy him. Think about our politics today. Do you need to go kill somebody? Do you need to go kill the other candidate? No, just destroy him. I would suggest to you that that's what they were thinking. Now, very easily you could interpret this literally the exact opposite way, that they were actually saying, how can we kill this guy? How can we get him off the scene? Either way, problem solved for them. I would just suggest the plan was not to kill him. The plan was to diminish him, cancel him, whatever you want to call it. All right? When Jesus became aware of this, what is this? The plan. Okay. So Jesus knows their plan is to destroy him at some point. There's going to be a conflict. I mean, this is going to come down to it. Now, like I said, it very well could be kill him, but they're going to fight. Two bullies on the playground. Eventually, they're going to fight, and this was what was setting up. So he became aware of this plan, and he withdrew from them, created space from them, and huge crowds followed him, and he healed. Therapeuo, same idea. He healed them all, and he warned them, or better translated, he rebuked them. All right, he gave a stern command to them, not to make him known. And this word known here is phaneros, which means to illuminate. All right, we get a word phosphorus from this word. So don't go out and illuminate this guy. Don't make a big scene where all the attention, the lights are on him. Okay? No, no, because remember he became aware and he withdrew from there. Okay, so I wouldn't go. We're still working Sabbath thing. That may be reading into the text a little too much. Is it saying it's not on the Sabbath? I don't know what day it is. All right, it could be. I'll leave it at that. It could be the Sabbath, but the text doesn't indicate that it is the Sabbath. All right. He warned them or rebuked them or challenged them, sternly commanded them not to make him known so that, all right, we've used this term a lot, hina, all right, it's an effectual clause, all right, do this or don't do this because it's going to have an effect, okay, so do not make me known so that, or he warned them not to make him known so that what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. So if they violate what he has stipulated or said or sternly commanded or rebuked, what might happen? The words of Isaiah might not be fulfilled. It's an effectual clause. You have to be quiet because or so that the words of Isaiah will be fulfilled. And what words are those? It's Isaiah 42, 1 through 4. You can hear it in 18. And watch this phrase. Here is my servant. Okay? Now, this is written 720-ish years before Jesus is even born, okay? So he used this term, my servant, my beloved. No one in Isaiah's day knew what this meant, okay? The same thing, Isaiah 53, he talks about the suffering servant who is to come, who bore our stripes, bore our iniquities, all these things, okay? But he's using sort of this nebulous terms. Here's my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved in whom my soul delights. Does that sound familiar? At the baptism, what does God say? This is my beloved son in whom I delight. Eudokia, all right? Same idea, all right? I will put my spirit on him, all right? And what happens at the baptism? You see what he's saying? My servant is the one that I'm going to initiate. I chose him. This is my son, my beloved. My soul delights in him, and I will put my spirit on him. What happens at baptism? Holy Spirit descends like a dove on him. All right, so that's being fulfilled right here. And he will proclaim justice to the nations. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean he's going to go out and go, I'm here to tell you about justice. No, to proclaim justice is to instill justice. At the end of the day, what's going to be the result? He will proclaim, establish justice to the nations. All right, period. That's going to be the end of the story. All right, 19. Here's kind of what's going to happen. He will not argue or shout. No one will hear his voice in the street, meaning no one's going to overhear the arguments. No one hears the shouting, the arguing, all these things. He will not break a bruised reed, okay? So what that means, if you've got a reed and it's broken, and he wouldn't even go up to it and go, you know what, you're not even worth this. I'm just going to pull you up. If you're already broken enough, all right, I'll just break you in. No one cares if you break a bruised reed, all right? But it's saying he won't even do that. He'll look at the bruised reed and go, oh, what a sad little bruised reed. And pet it, okay? That's the implication is he wouldn't even break that bruised reed that everyone else would walk by and think is useless, all right? And he will not put out a smoldering wick. This poor wick is just dying on its last little glimmer. He won't even put that out. He'll look at it and go, oh, poor little smoldering wick. You go, buddy. Come on. You can fight back. All right? Do you understand? Do you see what he's saying? This is what Isaiah has prophesied. My servant chosen, delighted in, spirit on him. He's going to proclaim justice to the nations at the end of the day. He's not going to argue, shout, break, put out a smoldering wick until, which tells you what? There is coming a day when he will shout, he will argue, he will break the broken reed, he will put out the smoldering wick, all right? Until he has led justice to victory. Again, he's going to do what? Proclaim justice to the nations, but he won't do this. Now, not argue or shout, not break, not put out a smoldering wick. if people run around saying, Jesus did this, Jesus did this, Jesus did this, what's going to happen with the Pharisees? Versus if they're just quiet and they leave Jesus alone and they let him do his thing. Do the Pharisees get all up in arms? No. So it's saying, you guys have to be quiet so that I don't have to have this conflict. You guys have to be quiet about this so we do not prematurely get into this battle. Because if he gets more famous and more famous, what are the Pharisees going to do? Do you see what the plan was? The plan was, you guys got to keep this down so that we don't prematurely get into this, and I have to shout, I have to argue, I have to do all these things. Okay? So, shh, so that this can all work out until I've established justice. And 21 says, the nations will put their hope in his name. Again, that's the end of the story. Okay? So to fulfill all this, you guys got to keep it quiet. Don't run around telling everybody. Don't stir up all the anger of the Pharisees, because we'll eventually get to this. Okay? Is that okay? Everybody okay with that? All right. I know that's a little complex. So that was a difficult thing to interpret, because it creates a passive Messiah, doesn't it? This Messiah, because what's the Messiah supposed to do in first century Jewish people's eyes? Is he breaking bruised reeds? Is he putting out smoldering wicks? Is he arguing, shouting, fighting, killing all the bad guys? Yeah. And he's going, no, you don't understand. That's not who I am. I'm the passive one until I establish justice. Revelation 19, white horse coming down, tattoo on the thigh, wearing people out. All right? 22. Then a demon-possessed man who was blind and unable to speak was brought to him. All right? Now, when you think demon-possessed man, what kind of image, what kind of action, what kind of character do we see here? Demon-possessed. Most of us, what goes in our mind, where do we go? We go Gerasene demoniac, right? Naked, hair going everywhere, bloody, chains everywhere. Or you see this violence, the demon-possessed boy whose father comes and says, Jesus, help me with my unbelief. All right, this demon is throwing him into fires and stuff. All right, so there's a violence to this thing. There's this. But what is this guy? This demon-possessed man, what are his symptoms? What's his possession? Blind and can't speak. You ever seen anybody that's blind and can't speak? Are they violent? Are they causing a commotion? No, what are they doing? they're just sitting. But do you see what's going on? All demons aren't out there to make you violent and make you crazy and make you do stupid stuff. Some of them just want to blind you and make you unable to speak. Problem solved, right? It's still an infirmity. It's still a debilitating work, all right? So now this person can't see the beauty of God's nature, and he can't speak of what he can see. So this demon is sort of tricky, isn't he? This demon is subtle. Again, it's not out front Gerasene demoniac running through the tombs, all right? It's not that at all. So open your mind to the idea that they aren't all crazy, okay? Sometimes it's just that debilitating thing that pulls away and robs this person of his ability to worship, all right? He was brought to him, Prospero, so literally he's calm enough where someone picks him up or leads him to Jesus, all right? And immediately he says he healed him so that the man could both speak and see. Good day? Yeah, good day. And all the crowds were astounded. It's existemy. Histemy is set in place. This is normal. I can live here. And everybody goes, okay, if this is histemy, this is normal, this is set in place, this is what happens every Tuesday, this is what would be over here. All right? See what I'm saying? Existemy means to be away from it or off of it. Okay? So that's what we're saying here. So when it talks about that they were astounded by something, it literally is saying that that's out of place. That's not what happens on Tuesday. Okay? So that's the idea, that they were astounded because that's not supposed to happen. All right? That's not what we normally see. They were saying and said, perhaps this is who? Son of David. Now, where would they get a term like Son of David? Well, who's Son of David? 2 Samuel 7, the Messiah. David, your son, will sit on the throne forever and ever. Isaiah 61, the blind, the lame, the mute, all of this stuff, okay? So that's what they're saying. Perhaps this is the Son of David. Now, who cannot possibly allow this idea of the Son of David, especially when it's that guy that we're trying to destroy? He just made it worse, right? So when he heals this guy, the crowds are like, maybe this is the Messiah. Maybe this is the Messiah, all right? Now, you notice it doesn't say, and they ran around telling everybody, go telling it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born, all right? They do what? It's just sort of this hush, whisper thing, okay? When the Pharisees heard this, they did end up hearing this, they said, this man, the man drives out demons only by Beelzebul, okay? Lord of the Flies, literally what it translates out to be, okay? The ruler of the demons, or the archon of the daimon, all right? So he's the one in charge, which is a really good explanation, right? That's a good explanation. Well, he's just tricking you. He's casting out demons, but he's really doing it either through the power of Beelzebul, or he is Beelzebul, and it's just this deception and this lie to trick you into thinking you're seeing what you're not really seeing. He's trying to lure you away because we have Torah and he's Beelzebul, okay? Knowing their thoughts, which I always warn people, never think around Jesus, okay? Just Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, all right? You Ghostbusters with me, all right? And this is, remember when we talked about that Joseph was pondering these things in his heart? This is the exact same word. So it's knowing their passionate thoughts, knowing the conflict and what's stirring up in their hearts. It's making their heart race. The pulse is going up. You're breathing a little faster, all right? Knowing their passionate thoughts, their enthumas. He told them, every kingdom divided itself is headed for destruction, all right? That's the word for wilderness, okay? So he's using sort of geopolitical terms. So you had a kingdom, and now it's overrun with sand and leaves and trees and all this. You've seen this abandoned houses that just have like trees growing up through the living room. Okay, that's what he's explaining. Your kingdom will become desolate, all right, if you're divided against yourself. And no city or house divided against itself will stand. And he's going to give them three options of how this happened. Number one, if Satan drives out Satan, he's divided against himself. How will this kingdom stand? He goes, that's a dumb point, all right? Things don't work that way. This don't work this way, okay? So that option is out. Number two, in verse 27, if I drive out demons by Beelzebul, who is it your sons drive them out by? So you and your little Jewish exorcists that are driving out demons, just curious, who do you drive them out by? I can make the same argument about your sons and the way they do this, all right? Which is really fun. Probably one of my favorite stories in Acts, when the 7 sons of Sceva try and go cast out the demons. They go, yeah, Jesus, I know. Paul, I've heard of that guy, and I don't know who you are. And he beats the snot out of them, and they run out of the house naked and bleeding, all right? Like I always say, when you run out of the house naked and bleeding, you lost that fight, okay? That you just get the clothes beat off of you. That's a hard beat down right there, all right? But you see how he does it? For this reason, or therefore, they will be your judges, all right? Because I can say the same thing about your exorcists that you claim to be doing this. 28. Or, third option, if I drive out demons in or by the Spirit of God, then the kingdom of God has come to you, or come upon you. Now that's a powerful phrase right there, all right? This idea of come upon you, it's the Greek word phthano, which means not just it came in the door, all right? It came before, it preceded the expectation of the Messiah that was coming, and it's here, baby. It's here, and you're sitting, and it's sitting right on top of you, and you don't even see it. What a scary thought for a first century rabbinic man to miss the Messiah. And he goes, that's exactly what you're doing. If I'm casting out demons by the Spirit of God, the kingdom of God is here, and you're trying to destroy him. Now, how quiet is that room? You see what I'm saying? Okay. How can someone, in 29, so he's going to go to a little parable here. How can someone enter a strong man's house and steal his possession unless he first ties up the strong man? Then he can rob his house. What's he saying? Yeah, I'm tying up his house because I'm stronger than he is, because the kingdom of God has indeed come, because I'm the one casting out demons, not your little exorcist people. I'm the one doing it because I'm stronger than they are. Another point. Anyone who is not with me is against me, and anyone who does not gather with me scatters. Pick a side. Now, this is an odd little placement of this sort of parable thing. In Mark's gospel, and again, in Mark's gospel, it's out of place too. In Mark's gospel, John at one point says, hey, Jesus, we saw some guy casting out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he wasn't following us. And what does Jesus say? Don't stop him. Leave him alone. If he's not against us, he's for us. This exact phrase. Okay? So you don't need to stop him. All right? Don't stop. Just let him do his thing. Okay? And so I think this story may be kind of pulled into this same thing. All right? 31. Now, again, a different point. So let the points progress. 31 says, because of this, and I would argue this, that he's talking about what's said in verse 24. The man drives out demons only by Beelzebul, the ruler of demons. Because of this statement, everybody with me? All right? So when Jesus says, because of this, because you're saying this, I tell you, people will be forgiven every sin and blasphemy, but the blasphemy against the Spirit will not be forgiven. Keep going. He's going to reiterate this point. Whoever speaks a word, a logos, against or down on the Son of Man, it will be forgiven him. But whoever speaks against the Holy Spirit, it will not be forgiven him, either in this age or the one to come. Which is a lot of controversy. Ooh, what is that? What does it mean? What does it mean to commit the unpardonable sin? Well, in Mark's gospel, he adds one more sentence to this little episode. He says in Mark 3:30, for they were alleging he had an unclean spirit. Okay? So he makes the point, any man who speaks blasphemy against the Son of Man will be forgiven, but if you speak it against the Holy Spirit, never forgiven, because they were alleging he had an unclean spirit. Okay? So let's put your mind at ease real quick. If anybody is just really concerned that they have committed the unpardonable sin, you're here, so I'm guessing you haven't. You haven't gone around saying, Jesus has an unclean spirit, or the Holy Spirit is unclean in and of himself. All right? I'm guessing you're okay. And I think a lot of people get really, really hung up on this verse that don't need to. All right? Because none of us are making this assertion. We're not alleging these things. They were. They were literally saying Jesus has a spirit of Satan in him. Okay? Now, how do you recover from that one? I mean, if you commit adultery, okay, and you come to the cross and say, God, forgive me, adultery, it's pretty much taken care of. But what if you come to the cross with Jesus, I think you have a demon in you, and you maintain that attitude? Where's the pardon? Where's the forgiveness? No, it is something you absolutely have to make the U-turn on this one. You can't go and go, you know what, I gamble, I cuss, I drink, I sleep around, I do all these things. Thief on the cross goes to the cross and goes to Jesus and goes, hey, remember me. And Jesus goes, you're in, sweet. But what if it was, I think you are Satan himself? That one needs to be addressed. Okay? You can't go to Jesus who has Satan inside of him and go, forgive me, one who has Satan inside of him. That one needs to be addressed, I think is the point he's making. All right? The others are forgivable. They're pardonable. All right? If anybody growing up, any ever worry I'm going to forget to confess some sin and ask God to forgive me for this sin, and I'm going to go to hell because I forgot that I'd stolen 20 cents from my mom's wallet when I was in third grade? No, nothing, Brishna? Okay. Brishna's just the exception to the rule, all right? But, how have you confessed all your sins? I don't know. I commit a lot of them. I mean, there's a lot out there. But I think this. I think what Jesus is trying to communicate is this is a biggie because it's an identification. You're asking me to forgive you, to atone, to propitiate for your sin, but yet this is how you see me. And you can't get that forgiveness from me if this is how you see me. You have to change the dynamic. Why? Because they were alleging he had an unclean spirit. That's what needed to be addressed. And so that's why I say, don't really sweat it. If you've got some issues with thinking Jesus had Satan inside of him, we can talk. And I think we can come around full circle and we can make a U-turn on that specific one. And then we can move on to the other 9, 10 commandments that you're killing. Okay? All right. Any questions? Good enough? Good enough? All right. Next week we'll come back 33 through the end of chapter 12. Probably have a relatively, well, I'll say that. We won't be short. We'll go an hour like we always do. So, right? All right, let me pray first and let's go. Father, I thank you for just an opportunity to look at